So this would be like the easy kind of graphing problem, and I'm going to do this one for you. I don't want you to even do it. I'll give you one in a second, but I want you to see how I do it. The first thing I do is look down there, and I realize that x equals 3 would kill this function. Think about that. There'd be a 0 on the bottom of a fraction. Do you know that that makes an error on the calculator? You see how that's a big deal? So that's called the vertical asymptote. So I go to x equals 3, which is right there, and I put the asymptote there. You know, the asymptote used to be right on the y-axis, but I just moved it over 3 spots. One of the questions on the test could ask you that, like, what does this mean? And you'd say, oh, it means it moved to the right 3. So see how the asymptote is to the right 3 of where it used to be? And now, what's that going to mean? It's going to mean the other asymptote, which is the horizontal asymptote. That asymptote is whatever's out there. Y equals -1. And you might be like, but on this one, you use the opposite of the number. Well, that's because we don't trust what's inside there. That's another theme about that. On the inside, it's like the opposite of what you would think. So I used regular 3, not -3. And here, you trust it, and you use exactly what you see right there. Because that's which way it got moved. It got moved down 1, so the asymptote that used to be right on that x-axis got moved down 1. Now I'm going to make it in white just because I feel like it's going to look better if the asymptotes are the same color. Okay, there we go. So those are my 2 asymptotes. Then you have to have 2 exact points. If all you have is the asymptotes and some lines, you won't get the point. You have to have 2 exact points. For this, I move over 1 and up 1, like there. I should really have gone this way and this way. Like there and there to get my points. Now I want to explain how that works in terms of an x and y axis. Sorry, an x and y chart. If I put in the point right there, that spot, that is at 4, 0. And I want you to see how this makes sense. If I put in the 4, do you get I will have 1 over 4 minus 3 is 1. 1 over 1 is 1. Minus 1 makes 0. See? And the other point that's down here in the lower left, see it's upper right and lower left, that point is at 2 comma -2. Let's see if it actually makes sense. If I put in a 2 right here, instead of the 4 that was there, I put in a 2, then I have 1 over 2 minus 3, and 2 minus 3 is -1. 1 over -1 is -1. -1 minus 1 makes -2. Look at that. So there's a reason that those points make sense. And then I just have to draw the line getting closer and closer and never touching. That is the graph of 1 over x, except moved right 3 and down 1. So again, I'm going to clear this, erase this out. That was the graph of 1 over x, except that -3 moved it right 3, and the -1 moved it down 1. Do you feel like you get that? Okay, so if I just for this one, on your graph, I asked you to draw one, right? And then I asked you to not do anything yet. Let's do this. Go 2 to the right and put an asymptote right there. And up 1 and put an asymptote right there. Can you put in the dots and the swooshes to finish this puppy? What I just did is 1 over x, except I moved it over 2, and I moved it up 1. You see that? Do you see how I got that? Can you put in the dots in the right spot? And then the swooshes? Try it. See, once you have your asymptotes in, I think it's easy. I hope it is. Maybe I'm deluding myself, but upper right and lower left. And then I just have to get closer and closer and never touch. There's the graph. One of the questions would say, so what was the horizontal asymptote? And, oh man, it's going to be really hard to remember which one's which. The horizontal asymptote is this one. And to me, that kind of feels logical because it's kind of like way, like this way in the problem, which is kind of like a horizontal line. That one's the horizontal asymptote. That one's the vertical asymptote. And that one kind of makes sense to me because it's x equals 2. And x equals 2, if you graph it, it's a horizontal line. Sorry, vertical. It's a vertical line. X equals 2 is a vertical line. That's like right here, x equals 2. That dotted line that goes up and down. You don't have to have this down right this second, but you have to have it down by 2 days from now. I'll warn you, if you don't understand any graphing, then the best you're going to get on this test is a C. If all you can do is that adding stuff, adding the fractions, you know, like 1 over 2 plus 1 over x, and you get a common denominator, add them. If you can do that stuff, you'll be able to get a C. But without the graphing, you won't go beyond a C. If you can pull off this graphing and learn it well between today and tomorrow, and then take the test Wednesday, then you could get the A. Okay, side note, if you did have to add these together, just a reminder, you'd need a common denominator, so you multiply by the other denominator, you know what I'm talking about, and then they both have a 2x denominator, and the final answer would be x plus 2 on top over 2x. And you got to be smart enough to know you can't cancel that kind. They would both have to be multiplies. Can't cancel the x's there. And that would have been the final answer. There's more than that, but that's the, there's kind of 2 parts to this test. The part where you're adding up the fractions or multiplying the fractions. And this kind. All right. So I want to give you one from the top. Everybody go on your graph paper somewhere else. Draw one of these. X and Y axis. Ooh, I can't draw them straight. Come on. There we go. And I'd like you to graph one over x minus 2. Just graph that. I would start with the asymptotes. To me, once I have the asymptotes in there, this becomes easy. But once both asymptotes are in there, then it's easy. If you're like, well, there's nothing on the outside, then there's a 0 on the outside. You know what I mean? Like if there's nothing out here, then there's a 0 out there. So the asymptote didn't move on that case. So if you wanted to put a plus 0 to help yourself realize, oh, so it's y equals 0. The first thing I would have written is VA or HA. And I would have figured them out. And the reason you got to keep them straight is on one of the problems, it's going to say, what's the vertical asymptote? And if you don't know which one's which, you're like, well, I got these 2 numbers. One of them's -2. No, one of them's 2 and one of them's 0. But you don't know which one's which, you'd lose. All right, so the vertical was this one, and it was x equals 2. Raise your hand if you had that. Okay, good. And that's right here. I know you all had it there, but maybe you didn't write it down. I went and looked at a bunch of papers, and they had it in the right spot. The other one is, if the first one was x equals on the bottom, see, that tells you what letter to use. This one must be y equals, and it's y equals 0. And that's an asymptote running right here. And then upper right, lower left gets a dot right there. And then I just have to connect them. Get closer and closer to the asymptote, and the same thing this way. It's like a moth to a flame. It gets closer and closer. Can't control itself. Okay, There it is. Now, if that dot is not there and that dot is not there, you won't get the point. It'll say right in the directions. You have to have 2 points and the asymptotes. Okay? All right. Another kind of question just gives you a problem. 1 over x minus 4 plus 5, and then says, what's the horizontal? What's the vertical? Take a second and make sure you know the difference. Don't graph this one, just tell me. I said a way to remember this before, but I don't know if you'll remember it. Horizontal is horizontal. And vertical is zertical. It's helping you connect the word vertical and the X, and the word horizontal and the Y. I've been surprised how little dumb things like that stick in kids' heads. So, like made up words. All right. So Y equals 5 and X equals, careful, not negative 4, 4. Now, if you had to graph this one, it would be actually super easy. Don't even do it. Just tell me, would you agree x equals 4 would be like a line that goes over 4 spots like that. And then the y equals 5 is up 5 spots. And if you can put in the dots like here and here, and just closer, never touch. That's all there is to it. See, once you have the asymptotes, it's so easy. All right. Unless there's one more thing. What if they threw a negative in front? Does that change everything? No. It doesn't change the asymptotes a bit. But just watch what it does to the graph. If I throw a negative in, that's going to reflect the graph. It used to be upper right and lower left, and now it's the opposite. The thing that was up here is now down here. And the thing that was down here is now up here. In the front. And if the negative in the front is moved to here, don't freak out. Those are the same thing. If there's a negative in the front or it moves to the top. And it actually doesn't even matter which way you flip it. Those of you that are really good at like seeing this kind of thing, if I take this green graph and I flip it vertically or horizontally, it ends up on the yellow one. It doesn't matter. If you flip it, you flip it. You can flip it left, right, or up, down. Same thing. All right. So let me give you one like that. Everybody write this one down. Y equals negative this time. 1 over x minus 3. Everything is going to go along the same for the asymptotes. If I were you, I'd write out HA and VA in those two spots because the vertical's down there by the X. Once you get the asymptotes in there, remember that the dots have to flip to the new spots. Now, normal would have been here and here, upper right and lower left. So you don't do them there. You do them here and here. So if I wanted to like make sure you really understand this, that point right there is 4 comma negative 1. Guess what happens when you stick in a 4 in this problem right here? You get negative 1 over 4 minus 3, which is 1. Negative 1 divided by 1 is negative 1. Look at that. When you put the 4 in, you get a negative 1. And for this spot here, which is at 2 comma 1, when you stick in a 2 right here, you got negative 1 divided by negative 1, which is positive 1. It works. It makes sense. How about those blue dots? I'm just erasing them because those blue dots are just where usually the graph is. So what made it move to the new spot? That negative right there. That's what made it move. And the swooshes ended up in the other quadrants. Now that's everything in graphing. We've done it 2 days now. Friday, which you probably mostly forgot, and now today. Now tomorrow I'll give you one more like that to practice. And there's a worksheet for tonight, which is like on paper, I almost never do that. And I always collect those, put them in the grade book. So strongly recommend that we spend some quality time on that worksheet. But one more thing that's on the worksheet and on the test is problems like this. Everybody please write this down. X squared plus x over 2 times, no, let's actually make it divide. Divide. Change it to divide. This is about as hard as they get. In fact, this is definitely as hard as it would get. Okay. Really what I'm scared of is that some kids won't know how to factor that, and even worse, some kids won't know how to factor that. I think you know that the divide means you got to change it to times and flip it. I think you remember that. But I'm afraid that some kids are going to struggle with the factoring. But hey, that's the way it is. Some kids have got factoring down by now, and some kids don't. Hopefully, you'll ask me today and tomorrow if you want help on that. I can show you how to factor this. We're almost done, and then you're going to have a bunch of work time with this worksheet. The kids that are absent today, I hope you're watching this video, and if you are, you're really smart, because that was a lot of review that some kids are going to not go back and watch. It's going to hurt them on the test. You're smart to be here. I'll also tell you which ones to skip on the worksheet. So, for this one, did you notice that x comes out and it's x plus 1? If you're bad at factoring, you might not have known that, but we can fix that. Just got to come up and get some coaching when you get your worksheet. There'll be a lot of things like that. You can get some help from me. On this one, there was a 2x in both of them. So that's what factors out. And then what's left? X plus 2. All right, so now I'm going to rewrite this thing because it's getting messy. X plus 1 on top here, over 2. Divide changes to times, and then I got to flip it. So the 4 goes to the top instead of the bottom. And then I got 2x times x plus 2 here. All right, now do you know what can cancel? Yes. The 2 and the 4 can absolutely cancel. Let's do the 4 into 2 2's. I think you guys would agree that 4 is 2 times 2. And the reason is there's 2 separate 2's we can cancel now, see? Remember my favorite saying, if you can factor it, you should? Changing a 4 into 2 times 2 is factoring it. That 2 cancels that 2, and that 2 cancels that 2. Sweet. There's one more thing that cancels. Say it. X is correct. That cancels that. And when they cancel, which that word has been canceled, it's supposed to really be simplifies to 1, but it's like so much harder to say that. There's really a little 1 everywhere where those disappeared. There's little 1s, but they're all times each other. So it's just x plus 1 on top and x plus 2 on the bottom, and that's it. Like I said, that's about as hard as they get. If you can handle that one, you're good on the multiply and divides. Only other thing is add, subtract, and that you need a common denominator. Let's see if you know the common denominator thing. To do add, subtract, you need a common denominator. So you multiply by the other denominator. Mr. M, in the front row, could you tell me what the common denominator, oh, no, that's too hard. Can you tell me what to multiply by right here? You are correct. I would call it the other denominator. And right here, Chase? Correct. Now look, the reason we do that is because that's supposed to be the same as that, and it is. There are implied parentheses right here. You need to know that those exist. I'll put them in yellow to make them stand out. Okay, and then to get the final answer, 2 times 1 is 2. 2 parentheses x plus 2. I'm not multiplying that out. It'd be a waste of time because you'd have to factor it back out at the end. And now, did you mess up this part? I warned you. That's the one that tons of kids are going to screw up. They get that it's minus x, but then they think it's plus 2, and it's not. It's minus 2. Why? Because that negative is really on the 1. We've talked about that. And then that distributes. So that is a negative 2 right there, which with the other 2 cancels out. Final answer, negative x over 2x plus 2. Yes, it's legal to multiply this out if you feel like you have to, but I don't think you should. Because it's better to be able to see what cancels. If you factored it, you can cancel stuff. Okay. Feel a little overwhelmed? It's okay. Test isn't tomorrow. I'm really glad it's not. Tomorrow we get another review day. Wednesday's the test. All right, now let's take a look at this worksheet. I'm going to pause while I hand it out and I'll tell you which ones to skip. So we're going to keep it simple on this worksheet. I'm assigning the odds tonight. So start with number 1. On either side, it doesn't matter, but I personally, I'm going to start with the number 1 that looks like this. X over 4, if you're on the wrong side, I'd flip it. 3x plus 5 over x. Now to be able to subtract here, we need a what? Common denominator. Good. So now I'm going to multiply. Over here, I multiply by something. I think parentheses are always smart for these. Sometimes it'll matter, sometimes it won't. And I hope you know you multiply by the other denominator. And then I'm going to put in my implied parentheses. Did you know that there's parentheses there? The yellow ones? You should put those in. They're called implied. Otherwise, you're going to by accident forget to distribute the 4. And remember, when it's subtract, there's a big gotcha in there. A ton of kids are going to mess up one of those numbers. Denominator's 4x. That's super easy. This is an x squared. Don't forget it's not 2x. X times x is x squared. And like I said, don't be the kid that messes up one of your signs at the end here. You do it. It's your worksheet. You can times it by 4 and then hit them with the negative. I personally would just multiply them by a -4. And then finish it up. And that's your answer. That's all you got to do. Get a common denominator, multiply them out. All right, so again, you're just doing the odds on both sides. That saves us something to do for practice tomorrow night. And that's all I got for you. Thanks for paying attention really well. Trying hard.